If you're considering getting lithium batteries and a 3000 watt or larger inverter, then you are definitely going to want to watch this video. Now then, I have a Lithionics 315 amp hour battery. I have a Xantrex 3000 watt inverter. I can run my air conditioner on battery, and I basically can run anything in my coach simultaneously. And so I have the ultimate portable power station in my leisure travel van. Now then, if you have an RV and you're considering doing this as well, because as we know, with as many RVers there are out there, the more RVers and less campground availability, you are going to want to make sure that you have power if you have to boondock or if you're staying overnight in a Walmart, whatever it may be, that you have the ultimate power source. Now then, there has been a recent discovery about InRush Currents when it comes to these 3000 watt and larger inverter chargers and how that can affect a battery BMS. With the Lithionics, I'm very thankful that I was able to upgrade the firmware. There's a few best practices that you want to do in order to make sure that your batteries are safe. Now then, if you have lithium or you're considering lithium that's not Lithionics, we'd suggest that you would contact that manufacturer to see what they suggest to do with this, because you can really hurt your battery with these large inverters. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of this, so I got Stephen Tartaglia, who is the founder and the owner of Lithionics Batteries. I got him on a video interview that we're going to play right now to get to the bottom of this, as well as he gives some really great insight on the best way to make sure that your Lithionics investment or your lithium investment stays as safe as possible when you have one of these large inverters. Now, if you have a 2000 watt or below inverter, you really don't have to worry about that because that inrush current isn't that great. But 3000 watt and above, the way that people are really starting to do RVing, yeah, you want to watch this. So let's go right now to that interview with Stephen Tartaglia of Lithionics Batteries. All right, I am here with Stephen Tartaglia, who is you're the founder of Lithionics, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And so you and I started talking, I guess, last year, and I had bought Battleborns. Then I found out about Lithionics and quickly sent the Battleborns back and haven't regretted it since. So how did Lithionics even come about in the first place? How did you start this company?
Gosh, it was not to be a battery guy. I was retired, and back during the housing meltdown of '09, I saw a lot of friends losing their job. I had sold a big company. I had 50 engineers. And I said to my wife, let's come out of retirement. We're traveling the country by RV. I love RVs, but I hate the fact that I have to get in my diesel pusher, start up 2 diesel engines just to have air conditioning. And so the genesis of this whole lithium power generator replacement started with my relationship with Roadtrek. I talked to the owner of Roadtrek, and he said, number one complaint is noise under the bed. Number one warranty issue is generator service and breakdowns. He said, will you develop a system? So we partnered with Atom Nations from Nation Starter to develop that second alternator. And then Roadtrek took off. But then the Canadian dollar collapsed against the US dollar, and Roadtrek started making their own batteries. And it didn't go well because they didn't integrate the batteries very well with the alternators. So, you know, the story, Chapter 11, a lot of unpaid warranty claims, and we took the idea to Winnebago and to Coachman, and that's where we got started. But that only took place about 5 years ago. The RV industry was telling me, look, we're just coming out of a deep recession. We don't have time to develop these radical electrifications, but now this is the year that everybody wants it. And it's coming from the grassroots, but it's also coming from management at these companies, and part of it is legislation.
Wow. And so with Lithionics, I mean, what you've done with everything from the built-in Bluetooth on that 315, I mean, whenever I installed my battery in my leisure travel van, I have an all-in-one system. I mean, your built-in heater, the BMS, the Bluetooth, just the on-off button is pretty radical. I didn't see that on any other batteries.
No, because they're made to be a lead acid battery replacement. They're not purpose built to be a generator replacement. And so I do have to preface our whole conversation with one thing. We started the company a decade ago with a contactor. So when we had a contactor-based BMS, we invented a contactor alongside Tesla. So we use the same bistable latching contactor, and that can do 3,000 amp surges. Well, along comes the explosion of B vans, and B vans have a space premium. So Winnebago said, look, we don't have room for, and it's not just Winnebago, it's others, but primarily Winnebago with the Revel, the View Navion, and now the Echo. They said, you've got to do an internal BMS, but it has to be UL. Well, that's a MOSFET BMS. It's a solid state BMS. I have to tell you, if you go to my website, you'll see I don't like internal BMSs. They're super small, 4 inches by 4 inches by 1 inch thick. And so they are super compact. Look at the battery next to your left shoulder. It's a 12E130. Everybody else is a 100. And we have an internal BMS. That battery is built like a Swiss watch, but it will not pass UL. So how we got through UL is we had to make that solid state contactor or solid state BMS redundant. Well, there's no room to be redundant. So we developed this external intelligent circuit breaker to get UL redundancy. So we're actually the first company in the world to have UL listing on that compact series BMS, which is a MOSFET-based BMS, because UL doesn't like solid-state BMSs. They're what I would call shrinking violets. They have to be operated in a very narrow window because they're solid state and they blow very easily, whereas a big contactor that's made with pure silver is not going to have those kinds of effects. And it's not really the effect of high charge rate or the effect of high discharge rate. It's transient voltages. It's inductive kickback. What happens if the BMS disconnects when the AC is running? You get an inductive kickback. These are transient, momentary loads. And then if you look at the capacitive inrush, we learned about capacitive inrush on all of our projects with Disney World. So we found that the inverters were causing a tack weld on our contactors. We pulled in a bunch of experts and they said, oh, you need a pre-charge. Okay, what's a pre-charge? Well, if the capacitors are drained in the inverter, and they would never be drained with a lead acid battery, but if you drain the capacitors and they're at 0 volts and the battery is at a certain voltage, it's just like a cranking event. You've got a very low resistance. Like our batteries compared to the imports, we are literally half the impedance. That's a huge margin of difference. We have more copper. We don't use aluminum. We've got the best cells in the world. They're A-prime cells that can do engine cranking. But the issue is we never had to worry about inductive kickback or capacitive inrush on these small 12-volt batteries because we were always using a contactor. Well, along comes Disney and other people at 48 volts. We had to put a pre-charge circuit in. It's very simple. You have to bleed through a resistor network a low amount of energy to bring the capacitors up to 80% of the voltage of the battery for it not to be considered a dead short circuit. Mm-hmm. So we went to all the inverter makers and we said, what is your capacitive inrush? Nobody could tell us. Nobody.
Wow.
Not one inverter maker knew. So we said, why don't you know these numbers? They said, because they're meant for lead acid batteries. They were all designed to have a resistive block that would slow boot a 3,000 watt inverter. So we said, what's the first thing we have to do? We have to measure it because we can't get it from the inverter makers. So in our lab, we hooked up oscilloscopes and we measured a high frequency inverter, which would be a Xantrex or a Kisei. Those are high frequency MOSFET based. They're very instantaneous boot up. But for example, the Xantrex 3000 is 1,600 amps at about say 10 to 20 milliseconds. So we started testing, well, can these solid state BMSs do 1600 amps when we've rated them for 1200 amps? You can. In that white paper that we just wrote, for every 1 milliohm difference in total circuit resistance, you knock down 450 amps of inrush. Here's where we got in trouble. The Victrons. We were waiting for 2 years for Victron to get UL 458 because otherwise they couldn't get into the RV business. Well, last summer they announced we're going to have UL 458. Hallelujah. So now we start showing these inverters to all of the big OEMs. And we're more of a business-to-business company. We're not really a business-to-consumer company. We sell to consumers because it builds a grassroots desire that the OEM RV makers cannot ignore. And that's how we became successful with our OEM RV direct business. I'd say about 80% of our RV business is direct to OEMs, 20% is through dealers like your company. Okay, all of that aside, we were shocked when people started deploying the, and let me back up for a second. If you look at all of the Winnebago Adventure vans, they're using a Xantrex 2000 with a soft start. So when we asked questions of some of these engineers, how come you're not using a 3000 watt? It still doesn't start the rooftop air. And so it's not just the 6,000 to 8,000 watts of energy to unlock a locked rotor in the AC powered air conditioner unit, AC motor, AC current. They still have to use, in many cases, a soft start. So what's the point of going to 3,000 watts when we still have to put a soft start in? Not all air conditioners. The Trumas don't necessarily need it. The GEs need it. The Coleman Machs need it. The 15,000 BTU Coleman Mach is a beast. It's probably 7,000 watts. Our batteries can do it, but it's a very long inductive rise to boot up that. So we don't have a problem with starting a rooftop air. When we measured the Victron, it was 2,700 amps. The Xantrex and the Kisei is 1,600 amps. So we thought, hey, we've got a new definition of physics that even the inverter makers are not aware of. So it's the purpose of having a USA factory with good engineers that can measure these things. All right, so we said, well, what do we do about this thing? We cannot fit a precharge inside a solid state BMS. We're in trouble because some of the van builders are putting a Victron 3000 with 2 feet of 4-aught cable. That's where you get a full 2,700 amps. We thought, we're in trouble. How do we solve this issue? So last month we said, okay, well, can we simulate a precharge with the MOSFET bridge? So we took our microprocessor and we fluttered the gates. They're MOSFET gates, semiconductor gates. So we pulse every 10 milliseconds a small amount of current until the voltage of the inverter comes up. The Victron has 18,000 microfarads of capacitors. It's 180,000 microfarads of capacitance because whereas the Victron is a low frequency inverter, the Kisei and the Xantrex are high frequency, so that the pulse duration of the boot up of the capacitors is more like 50 milliseconds.
Okay, so let me stop you right there because I'm a layman. I mean, I definitely know more about RV electricity than I did, a year ago. However, I still am mind boggled by all of this. So what you're saying with the Victron, it allows a much higher inrush than, say, the Xantrex or the Kisei, correct? And so,
yes.
So in what terms should somebody not look at a Victron and maybe look at a Xantrex instead? Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Well, so for 10 years, we have been very large supplier to the OEM yacht industry. That industry loves Victron. Our 24 volt and our 48 volt external BMSs already have pre-charge, so there's no problem. when you look at the reputation of Victron for their power conversion hardware, they are the best. They're the most expensive. They're the
Hmm.
heaviest. A Victron might weigh 55 pounds. A Xantrex is 20 pounds. Well, when you're building a B van, size and weight are very critical.
Yeah.
So, do we want to just tell people, sorry, can't use it on Victron? Absolutely not. So we hired a Victron, ex-Victron marine engineer. His name is James Turnbull. He has been a consultant to us for wiring diagrams for almost a year. And you've seen the wiring diagrams.
Hmm.
We never supported a single 315 battery on a Victron, but people are doing it anyways.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to not police these things. We have to find a way to first slow down the transmission. And if you look inside a Battleborn battery, which you can do that by looking at one of our Us versus Battleborns, if you look inside on that video that's on our website, they've got a multitude of very small wires. They're not designed to do engine cranking. We've got big, giant single cables. So our efficiency means that our batteries are going to run cooler and longer and crank and do all these surges, but that works against us with capacitive inrush. So the lower your impedance, the faster the inrush. Well, do we want to change the inside of our battery? No, because we'll take away life. Well, how do we adapt? We have to come up with a wiring diagram. What slows down the speed of light? Because if we have short cable lengths to a Victron and we're the lowest resistance in the world, which we are, then we're going to damage our devices. So we have to slow things down. Well, how do we do that? Do you really need 4-aught cable? You don't. 4-aught cable is going to dump power at 400 amps. Nobody's going to dump their power in an RV that quickly. So you slow things down by going with, say, a 2-aught cable over a certain length. Well, if you look at ABYC, they require fuses and a battery disconnect in between the battery and the inverter. Are people doing that? No, they're not. The industry is on fire. You've got 155 independent boutique van builders. We do business with the top 60. So we're learning this
Hmm.
by way of the boutique van builders who their job isn't to be electrical engineers. Their job is to make the sexiest off-road things. But now we're having to teach them physics. And so, no, you can't use 2 feet of 4-aught cable on a solid state BMS. It doesn't work. You can go to a contactor based external BMS, but we should have by the end of the week a wiring diagram that says if you wire this according to ABYC Marine or RVIA and you've got the right fuses and the right DC disconnect, those things slow down. Remember, 1 milliohm. If you slow it down 1 milliohm, you knock down 450 amps. What does that do? It makes a lithium battery look more like a lead acid battery. It's a resistive, slow boot up. So we have to look at everything in total. And a lot of these van builders, they're not putting disconnects in.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second for, because say with leisure travel van, with which what I have. So it came with a 2000 watt inverter, a couple AGM batteries. As everybody who's listening to this probably knows, I have the 315 Lithionics. I upgraded to a 3000 watt inverter, upgraded the fuses, all of those different things. So with this inrush capacitive situation we're talking about,
Mhm.
is it just 3000 watt inverters and above? What about the people who are getting the Lithionics 315 single and still just keeping their 2000 watt inverter? Does this
Yes,
apply to
not a
them as well?
problem. No, it's
So,
not a problem at all. But you know where the problem comes in? Now Victron has a 5,000 watt 12 volt inverter. And people are putting those things in. Oh my gosh, we haven't measured it, but it's probably 4,000 amps.
so if you
So
just
you've got to have a
turn
charge.
your batteries on and that inverter on that 5000, I mean, it would just blow it up, wouldn't it?
If it's a contactor, Lithionics, external contactor based, no, we're good.
Okay, but
Now, what would,
what about on the cheaper, say the when I say I don't necessarily mean cheaper, but the less expensive batteries that you can get online. You can even get lithium batteries on Amazon now for, that come from overseas. What about those batteries?
It's a good question because how can we have some, what we're reacting to, Brandon? We're reacting to 4 batteries out of the thousands that we ship every month. You didn't have a problem. Sandy didn't have a problem. Why? We're talking a really narrow, fine line. We're not going to fail every time with a 3,000 watt inverter because we don't know the installations. So what we have to do is put on our website, follow this installation, and you'll be able to use a single 315 on a Victron 3000. Those blueprints are being prepared this week. So we've already got the flutter, the MOSFET flutter circuit built into the BMS as a pre-charge. And now we've got to look at the whole system and say, how do we manage 2,700 watts? Quite honestly, a fuse or a DC disconnect, which should be there, they really slow things down. But a lot of people are not putting those devices in.
Right.
You don't have an issue. Sandy doesn't have an issue because you followed guidelines, but not every consumer is going to do that.
Correct. Yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, there are so many people that are wanting to do, say, my setup, which is the 3,000 watt inverter, be able to run the air conditioning for, extended amount of time. I'm looking at adding another 315 to my setup. So whenever you add 2 315s, it disperses it even more. You're even safer then, correct? If you have double 315s?
You would think that, but the answer is no.
Okay.
So I want to go backwards. We see people are calling us now saying, I put 4, and I'm not going to mention names. We put 4 brand whatever batteries in, they're blowing up. Well, how can that be? Well, it all depends on the other variables that we talked about. Let's say that you've got 2 315s and no inverter isolation switch and a 3,000 watt inverter and a short cable length. So if you look at the hysteresis, the inverter goes off, low battery cutout. So you first lose your AC power flow, but then you've got DC power flow, and then you've got the never die power reserve, which people love. It's there to engine crank if you need it. Or I'm sitting in bed, I'm not going to start up a charging method, and I just want to stay in bed a little longer. I hit the reset button, and I use up all of the never die power reserve. Well, guess what? The inverter's off, dead short circuit. The batteries are off. So what do? I can't push 2 buttons at the same time. I push one button to light up the battery because you still have power in it. If you use up the never die power reserve, you still hit the button. It will open up the circuit for 30 seconds looking for a charge source before it goes back into low voltage cutoff. So what happens is you make 2,700 amps into one BMS that's rated for 1,200. Now, if you have 2 batteries and a DC disconnect switch, you actuate the DC disconnect, you turn both batteries on, and then you turn the battery switch on. But again, this is so new. Lithium is so new. It's gone from being, we've done thousands and thousands of revels and views and whatnot, to now consumers want it. Lithium is viewed as the single most important thing in an RV. Why? Because if you're building 500,000 RVs per year, including trailers, but you're only building 10,000 new campsites, you're going to have massive places like Quartzsite, which people want to be off grid. So the main thing is I have to be off grid. So they're doing their own engineering on an electrification system that Winnebago might have put 20 engineers on. And now you've got the average person wanting to electrify to be off grid. And we have to do a better job of working with them.
Yeah, I see so many people that are wanting to, even in the day and age that we're in, having a nice battery system. We lost power here in Texas last winter for, 4 or 5 days. You never know what's going to happen these days. And so to have a battery bank, to have solar, to have all of these things is absolutely necessary in my opinion. And so I know that you guys, which I did the firmware upgrade on my 315 and it was so easy. So tell us about how you developed that firmware. And it seemed like it was a week because you kind of emailed me and said, hey, we got to address this InRush capacitive situation. And like in in a couple of days, I had that firmware upgrade. So tell me a little bit about that.
So I have about 6 engineers that work for me. We don't import anything but raw lithium, but everything else is made in the USA. And for 10 years, we do not use off the shelf BMS chips. We've written our own source code and our own firmware for our own microprocessors. So we got a phone call from somebody at Newmar. They said, I don't like the SOC. Who cares what my state of charge is? I want to know on my app, when am I empty? When am I full? If I'm discharging or charging. Have that changed done in 2 weeks. It was 10 grand. It only takes money, Brandon, but you short circuit it by having control. So when we found out about this problem, our reputation is on the line. We're the highest priced battery. Is the user experience fantastic? Absolutely. So we sit back and we have dreams. If we're going to go CAN bus, everybody's going to go with RVC CAN bus. And so we invented the RVC CAN bus that was adopted by the RVIA committee. Pretty soon, you're going to go into your vehicle, you're going to control everything from a tablet. Turn on the air conditioner, turn on the water heater, whatever. That's what people want. You cannot do that unless the battery is integrated into the Spider, Silverleaf, blah, blah, blah. That's the next generation. But the minute you say that you've got CAN bus control and CAN bus integration, what happens if a PGN changes? And that happens, somebody comes in and says, hey, I need to change my battery ID. If you can't do firmware updates in the field, you're in trouble. You'll never keep up with changes in the data backbone. You're going to see this in the coming year. Everything is going to be centered around the data bus, the data backbone. You're going to see every RV with an RVC data bus, and we're ready for it. And so you've got to be able to do firmware upgrades in the field.
Okay. And so with Lithionics, obviously that's my experience. And it was I just opened my app and hit firmware upgrade, and, a couple seconds or a couple minutes later, and it was done. Can you do that on those other batteries? Do they allow firmware like that?
Well, non-Lithionics or older Lithionics batteries?
No, non-Lithionics. Let's say somebody is going to choose to say the 4 or 5 battery bank with the Victron, and not realizing that their batteries are in danger.
So what we're seeing more and more is, because Victron is so new to the game and they have UO458, we've had about 4 or 5 batteries blow up, maybe 6 of 1,000 or 2,000 that we ship per month. That's too much. As the owner of the company, the commitment is 0 defects. The other batteries that are not Lithionics, they are not really BMSs, they're BPSs. It's called a battery protection system. So that electronic board looks inside the battery, but our BMS is more like a programmable logic controller, and you've seen that. You can do the upgrades, you can do data logging, you can qualify your own charging sources now with the data logging. So we have 2 microprocessors. Those are very expensive, and that's where we've got that bidirectional flow of data to our server. That's how you can say, oh, I want to reprogram to hold back 15%, not 10%. You can program changes over the app that normally, they don't even exist with the imports, but there are people that say, I'm operating a pet grooming vehicle. I'm not going to let the franchise owner go down to 10%. I want him to hold back 15%. So you can change certain features because of that microprocessor. I don't know if anybody's going to catch up with us. Competition's good, but this was my vision. I've been an RV owner since the year 2000, and I own 3 RVs right now. I don't have a house. I have 2 Grand Design 5th wheels, and we go back and forth to our place in the mountains in my Tiffin 40-foot diesel. So I know what I want as an RV owner. I've owned B vans, and I know from a user experience, why would you buy a dumb lithium battery? Quite honestly, just stay with the lead acid batteries in, say, a diesel pusher. But if you're going to go lithium, it's all about the user experience. It's not just saving weight and getting better battery life.
Right. And so let's sum this up. I've already kept you here for 30 minutes, and but let's sum it up. So at the end of the day, if you plan on doing a 3,000 watt inverter, you definitely need to follow the wiring diagrams that you're producing, as well as some, you mentioned Sandy, who is producing some as well.
Right.
We have those on pagosaSupply.co. You have them on Lithionics Batteries.com. Tell me, so if I'm a brand new person, I'm going to buy a single 315. I want to run my air. I want that 3,000 watt inverter. I just want a great package. Exactly what changes do we need to do now that we weren't doing a month ago? So with this new InRush
Right.
capacitive.
So if you want to be a top-notch customer service company, you don't take a mirror and hold it up to people and say, this is what you did wrong. I can sit there and say, Joe Smith, we don't have a single 315 with a Victron. It's never been on our website. This is a brand new inverter. We got caught by surprise. They've got more capacitance than any other inverter. They're fantastic machines. I love the Victron product, but we never endorsed a single 315. A 315 with an external BMS is going into a lot of these big diesel pushers. You'll see this at the Tampa RV Super Show, but we would never endorse that little baby solid state BMS to be used on a big 3000. So can we just stick our head in the sand? No, we have to find a way to create a wiring diagram that allows for a single battery, which is super powerful, to do a 3,000 watt. It's not on the website right now, but I think we'll have it by next week.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's what everybody is going towards, is a larger inverter, more capacity in their batteries. And so I think that you finding this situation and fixing it is absolutely, I mean, it's mind-boggling how fast you guys did it. I mean, again, I got an email and then like, here's a firmware upgrade, and okay, here's what we're doing, and now you're saying you're going to have a brand new wiring diagram coming up really soon, right, and everything. So
can I just part with some words of wisdom?
Absolutely.
You're going down the road and you see a billboard sign that says 1-800-EMIT-IT. Confucius says a well-defined problem is half solved. We're going to be transparent. We're not going to hide it. I know other competitors are hiding this issue. No, we're going to admit it. Once you admit it, you're halfway to solving the issue. So success is getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. We are a transparent company. It's the reason why you like us. It's the reason why Sandy likes us. I get an email from Sandy. I'm very disappointed. Okay, so am I. We're going to admit we have a problem and we're going to fix it right away, because we are very passionate about the electrification and the green aspect of getting rid of generators. So it's been my goal for a decade. This is a blip in the road. If Victron declared the number or Xantrex declared the number, we would have known about it, but we had to learn it the hard way.
Yeah. Well, and you did, and you fixed it immediately. And so that's what I really love about dealing with you guys. And like I said, I had bought Battleborns because I thought that was the way to go. And then I learned about Lithionics. You and I gained a relationship. And then next thing you know, we're helping you get Lithionics into RVs. So I love our relationship we have, and I love Lithionics. And the fact that you guys are doing this just shows that I chose correctly. So,
well, you chose Battleborn. You were a skeptic, and somebody showed me that video I said I had nothing to do with. I don't know who this guy is. So it's like, wow, do I choose you or Battleborn? You made your own decision. And it's great that we have that relationship. But it was a little rocky in the beginning. It's like you had your mind made up, and then we had to come in, and I thought, well, he's onto something here. And you definitely illuminated a choice. We don't advertise. We don't. Battleborn is a marketing machine. We are an engineering machine. Yeah. That's the way I'd like to leave it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Stephen. Well, I do appreciate it, and I look forward to all of the innovation you guys are doing. So, and we're getting batteries. Hard. Yeah, we're getting batteries in RVs, and that's what's important. So, get people off the grid. Love it.
No, you're one of the pioneers. That's for sure. Thank you, Brandon.
I'm learning something every day. All right, that was extremely educational, informational, very technical too, right? But that is the information that we need as we continue to upgrade our coaches to these large battery banks and these large inverters, because this is still a pretty new industry, this lithium and, running your coach just off battery. And it's something that's going to be, more and more, hopefully, that all the RV manufacturers start doing this more, getting rid of those generators, right? But anyway, I really appreciate you sticking through. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and we will see you next time.